So I want to talk a little bit about the philosophy of mixing in a worship environment. And this church in particular, Pine Hills Church. And this is just my particular vision, and through speaking with our worship pastor and kind of what we're looking for here, but talking about what is important, what we're trying to convey through what we do here, and utilizing sound as a tool for that. So when we're creating a mix, first and foremost, obviously lead vocal, who is ever leading worship, needs to be front and foremost, okay? The background vocals are just that. They are background vocals. We want them to be supporting the worship team, supporting the worship leader, not equal to, but supporting. And there's two reasons for that. One is the worship leader is leading the congregation. He's not just musically leading, he is leading the congregation. The congregation has to hear him first and foremost for a couple reasons. One is for direction and where he's going. Two is for that unity of the body. By him being the leader, or her being the leader, they are in charge of where we are going corporately in leading worship. So very important that they are heard up front. They need to be at the front of everything that we hear. The other part of that is, from a musical standpoint, typically your background vocalists are singing harmony parts. The congregation doesn't really need to hear the harmony parts specifically. They need to hear the harmony. Those are two different things. If you're hearing specific harmony parts standing out, well, then they're no longer harmony parts, they become the melody. And so the melody has to be first and foremost, and then the harmony parts are supportive, and they have to be supportive dynamically. So dynamics supportively, not over or equal to, because it just doesn't work. If a harmony part is equal to the melody, it becomes almost the melody or a secondary melody. And so we don't want that. It has to be subservient, and I think that's the right word, to the melody. Doesn't mean it's not important. It's incredibly important, but it's a supportive role. Okay, so that's for first and foremost with vocals. And that should be consistent throughout. Any style of song, any genre of song that we're playing, you're playing an up-tempo, high-energy song, a more contemplative kind of song, that volume relationship needs to be consistent, where the worship leader is what's heard on top. Okay, very important. Then I go the opposite as my secondary thing. Bass and drums. That's my foundation. Everything has to flow and build upon that bass and drums. And it's really important. And again, when you listen, you sit in a room and you listen, if you're only hearing high-frequency things, then there feels an emptiness to it. There has to be a foundation. And again, style makes a lot to do with this. Obviously, a high-energy kind of a song, you really have to make sure the kick drum is emphasized, and it's a lot of, very upfront with the kick drum. So drums and bass, very important. Then, what's leading? What instrumentally is leading? And usually you will be told that, or you can hear that. If it's a guitar-driven song, maybe an acoustic guitar-driven song, well, then that needs to be right up there. But it's got to come right below the vocals. It can't be above the vocals. And then your other instruments, again, supporting that. If it's a piano-driven song, well, then obviously piano up front. And you've got to think about your EQ on these instruments. If you're now doing a piano-driven song, and let's say the piano carries all of the verse and is pretty heavy in the chorus as well, well, then obviously you're going to approach that a little differently from an EQ standpoint as well. If the piano is playing by itself up front for like half a song, well, then odds are you're going to want to take the high pass off because you're going to want some of that low frequency. Now, if the bass comes in later, then maybe you want to pull it out when the bass comes in, and hopefully the player will back off the left hand as well when the bass comes in. But those are all things we got to be thinking about from a mixing standpoint. We can't, and this is huge, we can't think, I got my gain structure, I got my volume set, now we're go. Okay, great, you guys play. We can't think that way. We cannot think that way. We are an active participant in mixing. We are an active participant in the worship experience, and we have to be engaged in that. Very, very important. Huge. Very important. So overall, I think this is another area where a lot of churches struggle, where vocals become the predominant thing, and the band is sort of, oh yeah, and then them. And again, that doesn't really fit philosophically with what we're doing here, because the band and the vocals, those are complementary. The band should be representing musically what the vocals are representing lyrically. That is the goal, and that is what they're trying to do. And we as sound engineers need to help them with that, to help them balance, excite, encourage, respond, all of those things that they're doing musically. We have to help them translate that to the congregation. There are some songs that are just exciting and dramatic and just celebrational, and hopefully who's ever playing bass is celebrating and is heartfelt celebrating. We want to make sure that we are translating that we're not saying, oh boy, that bass, we want to make sure that that's cut back and not playing. Well, he's celebrating. Let's help him celebrate, because that's part of what the whole experience is of what we're doing. We're a church. We're not a concert. This is not a concert hall. So it's very important that we're thinking that way, and that we're thinking about how we can help the worship team translate, connect, and bring the congregation along in worship. Another huge part of that, and I do this all the time, is working volume in the room. On a contemplative sort of space where the congregation is really singing a lot, I'm always bringing down the band and bringing down everything so the congregation can hear more of themselves, because that's what we're here for. We're here to corporately gather, corporately worship, corporately sing, and so we want to encourage that, and we have a huge, huge role in that. If the worship leader is backing off the mic, the congregation is engaged in singing and really connecting, and we're driving the band, that doesn't make sense. We need to make sure we're backing off the band, that we're allowing the congregation and the band in the room to really experience what God is doing and experience that connection in time of worship through singing. That's a huge deal, and that is a very, very important part where we as sound engineers can contribute to that. The term that I like to use is we are the fifth Beatle. So we are an active part of the band. We may be sitting back here, but you have so much power over what you are doing by how you're mixing and how you're highlighting and or not highlighting certain elements, that it's just a tremendous responsibility. And so we have to come at it with that approach. We have to have our hearts right as well about what we're doing. We have to be in that place of worship. And this is always a conversation of, how do I engage in worship yet I'm running sound? Well, I think it's easy. You just engage in worship and run sound. And so you just do it. You do both. And as you're responding, and you're doing what you want to do in response in the moment of the experience, and being sensitive to that. You have to be aware of what you're doing. You have to be actively involved in what you're doing. But that's an active mixing experience. That's the term that you should always be thinking. I'm an active part of the worship team. I am not the guy who turns on the lights and turns them off when we're done. I'm not the guy who just turns the knobs up and then I'm done. But it's an active, integral part, really one of the most important parts of what the worship team is doing. If we are not representing what they're doing, all of their work and time and effort and preparation and all of those things are not being translated the way they intended. So very, very important. And another part of that is, if you're not sure of what the worship leader is trying to get across or what their intentions are, ask the question. What are you going for here? Is this a high energy kind of like in your face kind of a thing? Or do you want me to pull it back and really create more of an atmosphere? Again, it's a fine line. You have to be careful. This is not manipulation. That's not what we're trying to do. But we're trying to represent what the worship leader's vision is and what their direction is with what they're trying to do. So as a servant to them, because that's our role, we are serving them as the leader, and they are serving the body, and that's how all the whole process works. We have to be listening and responding and having that communication and dialogue with them so we know what it is they want, so we can represent what they're trying to do, what we're doing here with the board and with the mix. Okay, so that's really more of the philosophical approach, but very, very important. The most important thing, I'd much rather have somebody on the board who is approaching it with a worship philosophical attitude that they're really supporting and trying to help the worship team represent than somebody who's all about executing the technology and the specific frequencies and all of those kinds of things. We can work on all of that and we can learn all of that, but it's why and how is most important as to why we're even doing what we're doing and how it fits into the big picture of the worship experience. So always keep that first and foremost in your mind.